In a land where desolation and despair reigned, a prophet stood at the edge of a barren valley. Beneath his feet, the bones of a once mighty people lay scattered, sun-bleached and forgotten, whispering stories of defeat and abandonment. What happened next wasn't just a miracle. It was a divine spectacle that spoke to the power of hope, faith, and restoration. Today we're diving deep into one of the Bible's most mysterious and captivating visions, Ezekiel and the Valley of Dry Bones. Stay with us as we uncover the profound meaning of this haunting yet hopeful narrative, exploring its spiritual, historical, and symbolic depths. Could this ancient vision hold a message for us today? Let's find out. Before we step into the valley, let's set the stage. Ezekiel, a priest-turned-prophet, lived during a tumultuous period of Israel's history, the Babylonian exile. Jerusalem had been sacked, the temple destroyed, and the people of Israel were scattered, exiled, and demoralized. To the Israelites, it felt like God had abandoned them. They were a broken nation, both physically and spiritually. Enter Ezekiel, a man chosen by God to be his mouthpiece during this dark chapter. His visions, often strange and surreal, carried powerful messages of judgment, hope, and restoration. The Valley of Dry Bones, found in Ezekiel 37, 1-14, is one of the most well-known of these visions. In it, Ezekiel is taken by the Spirit of the Lord to a valley filled with dry bones. The sheer desolation of the scene reflects the state of Israel, lifeless, hopeless, and disconnected from their source of strength, God. Walking through the valley. Imagine standing in that valley. The bones aren't just scattered, they're dry. This detail is crucial because it symbolizes that death and decay have long taken hold. There's no sign of recent life, only remnants of a long-forgotten past. For Ezekiel, this was more than a vision. It was a representation of the utter despair of his people. Then God asks Ezekiel a profound question. Son of man, can these bones live? At first glance, it seems absurd. After all, what could be deader than dry bones? But Ezekiel, in his wisdom and humility, responds, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. His answer acknowledges God's supreme power, even in the face of human impossibility. God then commands Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones, telling them to hear the word of the Lord. As Ezekiel obeys, an extraordinary thing happens. The bones begin to rattle and come together, bone to bone. Tendons, flesh, and skin cover them, but there's still no breath in them. The breath of life. The moment God instructs Ezekiel to call upon the four winds to breathe life into the lifeless bodies marks a profound transition from reconstruction to resurrection. The Hebrew word for breath, ruach, also translates to spirit or wind, symbolizing the divine essence of life itself. Without this breath, the reassembled bodies remain lifeless shells, emphasizing a crucial spiritual truth. True life comes not just from physical restoration, but from the presence of God's Spirit. For the Israelites, scattered and broken, this message held immense power. Even if their nation was rebuilt, their restoration would be incomplete without the Spirit of God to breathe new purpose into them. The four winds represent the universality and omnipresence of God's Spirit, showing that it reaches every corner of the earth, no matter how barren or lifeless. This imagery reassured the Israelites that no exile was too distant, no despair too deep for God to revive. As Ezekiel prophesies, the breath enters the bodies, and they rise, a vast army standing in unity and strength. This transformation is both literal and symbolic. Literally, it foretells the restoration of Israel as a nation, rising from defeat to strength. Symbolically, the army represents a spiritually awakened people, united under God's purpose. An army's role is to serve, protect, and fight for a cause, reminding the Israelites of their divine calling to be a light to the nations and a testimony to God's faithfulness. This moment recalls the creation story in Genesis, when God breathes life into Adam, transforming dust into a living being. In both accounts, the breath of God is the spark that turns emptiness into vitality. For the Israelites, this was a promise that God would do the same for them, not just physically but spiritually, breathing new life into their hope, identity, and purpose. For us today, the vision is a powerful metaphor. It speaks to moments of despair and spiritual dryness, reminding us that God's Spirit can breathe life into the most hopeless situations. Whether it's a personal struggle or a broken community, the breath of life promises renewal, restoration, and transformation. It invites us to trust in God's ability to bring life where there seems to be none, turning emptiness into abundance and despair into hope. The message for Israel. In Ezekiel's vision, God reveals the powerful meaning behind the valley of dry bones. The bones represent the entire house of Israel, a people crushed by despair and exile, saying, "Our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone. We are cut off." This declaration captures their profound sense of loss, isolation, and hopelessness. They felt abandoned, separated from their land, their identity, and their God. But the vision wasn't one of defeat. It was a divine promise of restoration and renewal, a declaration that their story was far from over. God assures Ezekiel that he will bring the Israelites out of exile and back into their homeland. But this wasn't simply about reclaiming a geographical space or restoring a political entity. It was a call to spiritual revival, a reminder that God's covenant with his people remained unbroken. He was not only capable of returning them to their land, but of reviving their faith, healing their communities, and reigniting their purpose as his chosen people. The dry bones symbolized more than just physical death. They represented the death of dreams, hope, and spiritual vitality. Yet God's message was clear. No situation is too hopeless for his power. Just as he could breathe life into dry bones and form a mighty army, he could revive Israel's shattered spirit. This wasn't about human effort or ability, but about the transformative power of God's Spirit to bring life where none seemed possible. For the Israelites, this promise was a lifeline in their darkest hour. It reminded them that exile was not abandonment and desolation was not the end. God had not forgotten them. He was actively working to restore them, both as a nation and as a people of faith. This assurance rekindled their hope, showing that even when everything seemed lost, God's plan for them remained intact. This message speaks across generations, reminding us that God's power to restore is boundless. No matter how dire the circumstances, how broken the spirit, or how distant the dream, he can bring life, hope, and renewal. It is a promise that even in the darkest valleys, God's light shines, and his power to revive remains steadfast. The broader symbolism. While the immediate context of the vision was Israel's restoration, its symbolism transcends time and place. The Valley of Dry Bones speaks to anyone who has ever felt hopeless, lifeless, or disconnected from purpose. Think about your own life. Have you ever stood in a metaphorical valley surrounded by the remnants of what once was? Maybe it was a broken relationship, a lost dream, or a time of spiritual dryness. This vision reminds us that no situation is too far gone for God's restorative power. The rattling of bones coming together represents the first steps of renewal. Sometimes healing begins with a simple acknowledgement of God's presence, even when we can't see the full picture. The breath of life, the Spirit of God, is a reminder that true transformation comes not from our own efforts, but from surrendering to his will and power. Ezekiel's faith in action. Ezekiel's role in this vision is noteworthy. He doesn't just observe, he actively participates. By speaking God's words, he becomes a vessel through which divine power flows. This is a powerful reminder that faith often requires action. Like Ezekiel, we're called to prophesy over the dry bones in our lives. It could be through prayer, declaring God's promises, or stepping out in faith even when the odds seem impossible. Our words and actions, guided by God's Spirit, can spark life in places where hope seems lost. Modern applications of the vision. In today's world, the Valley of Dry Bones resonates in various contexts. It's a message for individuals struggling with depression, communities seeking reconciliation, and nations yearning for renewal. The vision challenges us to believe in the possibility of new life, even in the most desolate circumstances. For churches, it's a call to trust in the Spirit of God to bring revival. For leaders, it's a reminder that transformation begins not with human strategies, but with divine intervention. And for everyone, it's a promise that God's power can overcome any obstacle, no matter how insurmountable it seems. The story of Ezekiel in the Valley of Dry Bones is more than an ancient vision. It's a timeless testament to the power of God's Spirit to bring life, hope, and renewal. As you reflect on this story, consider the dry bones in your own life or community. Where do you see hopelessness? What feels beyond saving? Remember, God specializes in the impossible. He asks us, just as he asked Ezekiel, "Can these bones live?" The answer lies not in what we see, but in who we believe. Let us know in the comments, what does the Valley of Dry Bones mean to you? Thank you for watching, and may God breathe life into every dry place in your life. Until next time, stay blessed.